Spaceflight Simulator, a game in which you can make rockets. You got rocket fuel, rocket engines, rocket parachutes, everything needed to make a rocket. So of course what we're going to be making today is not rockets. That's right, I'm going to be building cars. Well, I'm going to try to build cars, to the extent that that is even possible. But why? Why would I do this? Let's go back to the beginning. When I first played Spaceflight Simulator, my first idea was to create military rockets, so I created some prototypes, like this one that crashed into the Earth and then somehow managed to get itself back into space, after the pilot had already died. Totally realistic. Then I got it to work and I managed to let it fly into the air, launch the rockets and land safely. I managed to make this monstrosity that didn't even leave the ground, and this one that gets into orbit and then shoots rockets onto the Earth from space. But there was one huge problem: aim. How do you get the rocket where you want it? You see, hitting a small target from space with a human-controlled rocket is basically impossible. If small rockets are too difficult to hit things with, why not use big rockets? Well, I put 64 engines on a rocket and let's just say Spaceflight Simulator didn't like it. But I forgot heat existed, so turned into an 8-engine rocket anyway. Most of it exploded or fell off and I didn't have a parachute, so I crash landed into the ground, safely returned to Earth. That didn't look very safe to me, to be honest. So I thought, small rockets can't hit, big rockets explode. Why not make ground vehicles? Why not make tanks? You see, there are wheels, so I can make a rocket, put it on its side and call it a car. My first car was this design, the simple car, but the cockpit kept hitting stuff, and if the pilot dies you can no longer control the vehicle, so I put the pilot on top. This worked better, but my car had one huge weakness: tiny hills. I put the wheels higher, added some thrusters at the bottom so I could manually balance it, and tried it out. It worked perfectly, until I ran into parts of the previous vehicle, which completely destroyed it. I could no longer go to the right, that's where all the debris was, so I had to go left. I added an engine on the right, now I could go in both directions. The engines, however, were too weak, so I made them bigger. This worked better, but I occasionally had to turn them off to not accidentally fly into the air. Don't you also hate it when that happens? When you're just driving around in your car and suddenly you just fly into the air? Now I had the car, but what about the weaponry? It is a tank after all. I made a tiny detachable rocket that I put on top. I placed the target, I shot, and the rocket hit the ground. It needed to be higher, so I made it higher, and it actually worked. I completely destroyed the other vehicle. 3 problems, however. 1. It could only shoot directly in front of it, not over stuff like hills or other vehicles. 2. The range was abysmal. 3. It could only fire in one direction. So to solve this, I decided to put the rocket straight on top. It worked, but there was a major downside. Aiming was really difficult. And remember, you only get one shot. If you miss, you no longer have any weapons. After many tries, I finally hit someone, but it was really difficult, and if I'm going to use a difficult to pilot tiny rocket, why not just launch it directly, skipping the whole driving around thing? One major limitation was the width of the building area. Spaceflight Sim really expects you to build vertically, whereas I wanted to build horizontally. So I made a big car vertically, put structures on one side to catch the fall, and then let it fall over. And just like that, I had a huge car. I call it the speed car, because it's a really fast car. I know, I'm really good at original names. This didn't have a weapon on top. It didn't need one. Look at how much damage this thing does by ramming into something. Yes, this kills the driver, which in real life might be a deal breaker, but in Spaceflight Sim, humans are worthless anyway. I kept, however, running into the problem of not sticking to the ground enough. So I thought, why not put a wheel under the structure so the engine is pointed downwards? Being so far off the ground would also protect against tiny hills. This is the speed car version 2. I had to remove some rocket parts before trying it out, because they kept exploding everything. Speed car V2, the strongest weapon ever, defeated by a tiny piece of metal on the ground. Crashed into the Earth, crashed into the Earth, crashed into the Earth, crashed into the Earth, safely returned. That doesn't sound very safe to me. So I tried out Speed Car 2 and I have to say it worked really well. You would not want to fight against an army of these, unless of course you have its biggest weakness: tiny wheels and rocket parts lying on the ground. What if it had 2 engines? Oh wow, that was a big explosion. But all of those rockets exploding was making a mess, and I needed to clean it up somehow. So I created the Bulldozer. It's really more of a box on wheels with an engine on top to make sure it doesn't take off. Wow, it actually managed to push away debris without falling apart, which in this game is really difficult. Just touching other objects without exploding is difficult. Next up we have the Goliath, a bigger box on wheels. Except when this one explodes, it explodes. Holy hell, that might be the closest thing we've got in this game to a nuke. More engines. I put an engine on top to make sure it doesn't take off. Never mind, it did take off into the air. Imagine having a car so powerful that you have to worry about it blasting into the air. 2 engines on top. This is what I'm talking about. Next up we have the cube. Oh, it destroyed itself. To make it roll I had to make it less of a cube and more of a circle. Speedcar V2 versus the cube. Oh, Speedcar didn't even reach the cube because of the wheels. Anyway, that's all for today. I would have made this video longer, but I'm actually really busy. I've been receiving calls from NASA all day. They instantly wanted to hire me after seeing this video. Oh, now SpaceX is calling. I gotta go. Bye.